I'd like to call the January 19th Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Hearings before the Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. Decisions of the board are based on the record of these proceedings. To grant a variance requires a concurrent vote of 4/5 of the board members. To reverse or modify the determination of an administrative official requires a simple majority. Evidence submitted to the board for review becomes part of the record. Appeals of board decisions are to Superior Court and are based on the record. Appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of the filing of the board's order in the Planning Division. A hearing before the board is conducted in accordance with its rules of procedure. Those who want to testify in a case are sworn as witnesses. The chairperson recognizes those who want to testify or their attorneys for presentation of evidence during the hearing. To ensure that all testimony is properly recorded, please come forward to address the board, state your name and address, and speak clearly. If you'd swear in everyone, please.
I'm going to ask that staff, applicants, and members of the public who wish to speak stand up and raise your right hand. All right. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Question for the board. Has anyone had any ex parte communication regarding any of the items before us today? Okay, thank you. First order of business is approving the minutes for November 17 and December 15. Do we have a motion? It's okay to make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. We have a couple of items that are going to be withdrawn or continued. Item number 1, 4202 Peachtree Avenue. The applicant is requested to withdraw or continue pending finalization of the settlement agreement. Do we have a motion?
The applicant yesterday informed me that his client would like to withdraw this item. The
Okay.
city has agreed to a settlement in that case, and the applicant will be paying for the trees that were removed in violation of city code.
Okay. So we just need a motion to withdraw item 1.
I'll make a motion to withdraw item 1.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 6 is 108 South 2nd Street. Staff is requesting a continuance. Do we have a motion to grant a continuance?
Do you have a date
Do
specific?
you have a date?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Item 6.
This will be the January, February.
We would like to continue this item to the February 16th meeting. At that time, we will better be able to evaluate whether the case is ready to move forward.
Okay. Do we have a motion to continue item 6 to the February 16th Board of Adjustment meeting?
I'll make a motion to continue.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Couple of other items. Board Member Johnson needs to recuse himself from item number 7. And Board Member Monroe needs to leave at 2:30 today. We do have alternates here, so should be good to go. The first item before us today.
Chairman?
Yes.
Did you continue item number 6 or 7 just a moment ago?
6, 108 South 2nd Street.
Okay, I thought you said 7. I'm sorry.
First item before us today is item 2, 605 Eastwood Road, 3 Cardinal Drive and 7 Cardinal Drive.
And Mr. Chairman, if we can just address a preliminary matter on this item. I'm aware that you all received some ex parte communications through email from, I guess, a concerned neighboring property. Staff asked you to disregard those emails entirely, but the email did bring up a substantive issue that my office has looked into. That's sort of a gateway issue to determine whether you have the authority to really act on this matter. There is a provision in 18-591 of our Land Development Code that indicates that variances can only be from dimensional requirements of our code, and it goes on to say that those dimensional requirements are limited to height, lot area size of the building, setbacks, and open space. Our office is looking into this, and we believe there may be a preemption issue because state law, which trumps local authority, states that when the 4 findings of fact that you all are very familiar with are met, that the Board of Adjustment shall vary any of the provisions of the zoning regulation. So our office is looking into this. We think this may be an antiquated part of the code that's carried over at least more than a decade, from what we can tell, and that it may be preempted by state statute. We've not had the opportunity to pursue that completely and get council to consider taking this out of the code. So I believe that the applicant, when we get to this point, will be prepared to speak as to the dimensional requirements, but I just wanted to let you all know our opinion in the city attorney's office on this item, or on that dimensional requirement issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is the applicant ready to proceed when the,
I believe staff's going to
yeah,
present
I understand.
first.
Good afternoon. This item was continued from the November Board of Adjustment meeting, but it does not have any additional history before the Board of Adjustment. The site is 605 Eastwood Road and 3 and 7 Cardinal Lane. 605 Eastwood Road is zoned office and institutional, and the other 2 parcels are zoned R15, which is a single dwelling residential district. The applicant has proposed to demolish the existing buildings to rezone the property for a gas station. In the applicant's proposal, they would have the convenience store located to the rear of the site, and that's the principal structure, and the fuel pumps or the fuel canopies located between the street and the principal structure. This application was accepted in July of 2022. For multiple variances, the applicant has revised their November site plan to remove some of those variance requests, and I will just briefly go through some of the changes. We do still have the request that the fuel canopy be located in front of the principal use, and that is in conflict with sections 18198 and 18206 on City Code. And I just have a couple of slides showing, if you can see, it's kind of light on the screen, but I think I blew it up in one. If you reverse the applicant's proposed site plan, you can still fit the same number of fuel pumps on the site with the building closer to the street. So I just put those in there for informational purposes. They were presented at the last meeting. This is the location of the 5 specimen trees that are proposed for removal. That shows the approximate location of the same specimen trees on the revised site plan. And the trees to propose for removal is a 27-inch live oak. And if I just get back to this slide, that's the one that's located pretty much in the front, the street yard of the site. The other ones are squarely located where, if the building were to be pulled to the street, it'd be where the building is located. Otherwise, where the fuel canopies and the drive aisles are to be located as proposed by the applicant. The applicant does propose to mitigate the trees according to the requirements of the code. The other request is for a 10-foot street yard along Eastwood Road, which is 5 feet smaller in depth than is required by code. In the revised proposal, the applicant has met the street yard requirement along North Cardinal Drive. The applicant has also revised the proposal such that only one of the landscaping islands does not comply with the minimum requirement for 333 square feet. That island would be the one that's shown in red on your screen, is 228 square feet in area, so they're requesting a variance of 105 square feet for that. The final request is that foundation plantings not be installed between the building and Eastwood Road. The applicant would still have foundation plantings along the North Cardinal Drive elevation. I'm not going to go through all of that, but just that's a lot of text that outlines all of the variances that were requested in November. And then this slide shows that that's been reduced as requested by the board to review the plan and see what requests could be addressed such that the board would not need to grant a variance. As the site's currently zoned, they could build 2 residents. Actually, there are residences on the residential lots, which is compliant with city code. 605 Eastwood Road could be used for an office, a bank, multiple other uses, and comply with code without the rezoning request. And so these are the 4 findings of fact that are set forth in general statute and in city code. And as you're considering this variance, staff just asks that you speak to these points to address how the applicants demonstrated that compliance with the code results in an unnecessary hardship that isn't shared among other similarly situated property. How that hardship, if it does exist, is due to conditions that are unique to this particular property and not, again, the same for other properties. That the variance does not result from actions that are taken by the applicant, whether those actions are real or, as is the case here, proposed development. And also that the variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. I'd like to submit the case summary and all attachments into the record, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have of city staff. Sam Frank is here on behalf of the applicant. I believe that he also has a presentation planned for you.
Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. Before I delve into our presentation on the substantive request, do you want to discuss the procedural issue that Ms. Huffman raised earlier?
Yes.
Good. We've been working on this application since May of last year and submitted it to you for your consideration. I think that speaks for itself that we believe it's appropriately before you. To the extent that you're inclined to seek any evidence to the contrary from staff or from the public, I'd like to reserve the opportunity to respond to and rebut the same.
That's fine. Yep.
I'm sorry, do you wish to do that now, or do you wish for me to proceed with my presentation on the
Go ahead and
substantive
proceed with your
case?
presentation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. First, I'd like to request that our PowerPoint presentation be entered into evidence. This is a different presentation than the one that was previously entered into evidence in November. With me today are 2 representatives of the applicant, Samantha Jones and Tommy Pease, both of whom are available to answer questions if you have questions for us that relate to the specific vision or operation of the future development on the property. At the previous hearing on this matter, the board considered our arguments for approval of a more extensive list of variances. We took your comments to heart. We adapted the site plan in a significant fashion with the intention of both improving the site plan based on your good comments and also reducing the number of variances that would be necessary to achieve this development. We talked previously about the value of this development, and I won't spend a lot of time talking about that now, but it's been a couple months, and so I do want to reiterate the fact that we lack a right-in, right-out fuel station on this section of Eastwood Road, which of course is a well-traveled thoroughfare for folks leaving the Wrightsville Beach area and heading back to I-40. For that reason, we believe that this is a particularly valuable location for this type of commercial use. This slide demonstrates the variances that have been removed. We're no longer requesting the streetscape depth or planting variances along North Cardinal Drive. And in fact, we've expanded that streetscape to 22 feet, which is 7 feet greater than the streetscape that's required. We also reduced the extent of the variance requested for the streetscape buffer along Eastwood Road from what was previously a request to reduce it from 15 to 5 is now a request to reduce it from 15 to 10. The landscape islands, the only landscape island, as you saw in Ms. Thurston's presentation, that remains non-conforming abuts the 25-foot setback in the back and sort of blends into the 25-foot setback in the back. That is the only island that we are requesting a variance on with regard to size. We're also no longer requesting a variance with regard to street-facing parking. These changes resulted in the reduction of a fuel pump and also reorientation of the design. There's some changes we made to the design that don't relate specifically to variances, but also improve the design. For example, the dumpster location has been reoriented to make it more visually attractive and also to incorporate additional green space into the site. Still need to remove some specimen trees, which, as you well understand, is a matter that now comes before the Board of Adjustment. You asked us to take a critical look last time we were here at whether or not it was possible to save one particular specimen tree located on the south side of the lot. And we took a careful and critical look at that and came to the conclusion that unfortunately it is not realistic to save that tree. We could have put a plan in front of you that worked around the trunk of that tree. That was viable. What is not viable is to protect the root system of that tree and therefore the actual viability of that tree for the long term. What we've done instead is adapted the site plan in a way that allows us to both preserve significant specimen trees on the site. There are multiple live oaks, several dogwoods, and some specimen-sized pines, longleaf pines, that we'll preserve on the site as shown here. We've also adapted the plan in a way that incorporates significant new planting and landscaping above and beyond what the city code will require. For example, in that 10-foot street yard along Eastwood Road, we will be able to achieve all of the required plantings that would have been otherwise fit into a 15-foot streetscape buffer. We also increased the landscape plantings along the side of the building that face Cardinal Drive. This image shows you the specimen trees that are being saved in green and also the new landscaping to be incorporated. As you can see, the developed site will incorporate significantly more plantings and trees than exist on the site today. The primary and first request to you for a variance is related to the fuel backwards provision in the code, which was adopted last fall. As we've explained previously, it's not viable. With due respect to staff's proposed alternative orientation for the site that was included in Ms. Thurston's presentation, that is plainly not viable because it ignores the 25-foot residential to commercial setback that would be required on the north side of the site, and it puts the gas pumps directly adjacent to the residential uses on that side of the site. This is a mock-up of an alternative plan that we came up with on our own that preserves that setback and attempts to incorporate the use on the site with the store located closer to both roads than the fuel canopies and the fuel pumps. As you can see, there are several significant problems. There's not a sufficient access for the fuel trucks to get to the tanks to refill. Most significant problem is that this pushes pedestrian access and vehicle traffic far too close to one another, which creates an unsafe condition. It creates poor visibility with regard to the operator of the store, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. It limits the parking in significant fashion and disrupts the thoroughfare or the traffic flow through the site. For all of these reasons, fuel backwards on this site, as would be the case for many corner sites, is not truly viable. The specific conditions that relate to this site, to the size of the site and the topography, that justify the variance are both the corner location. The language of the code doesn't contemplate a primary and secondary street. It only speaks to any street. The size of the site and the immediate proximity of residential use on the north side of the site. In addition to all of those reasons, proposing fuel backwards is directly contrary to a fundamental tenet of the comp plan. The city's comp plan encourages us to prevent crime through environmental design. This page that's on the screen now is an excerpt from that plan that demonstrates both graphically and with text what that means. In areas like this, where commercial uses are located along a roadway, the comp plan encourages us to locate the buildings further back to maintain a line of sight from that building across the unimproved section of the land and to the street. This is for exactly the same safety reasons that were described in the expert letter that we submitted into evidence in November. In this case, the 4 factors to support a variance are plainly supported. As indicated in our original presentation, a fuel station at this location will benefit the city and will accommodate current unmet demand for those services by citizens traveling westbound on Eastwood Road by providing a right-in, right-out alternative. However, the technical standards of the code are not well aligned with that need, which is why we are before you today and request that you approve the aforementioned updated list of variances. Unnecessary hardship would result from strict application of the ordinance. Strict application of the code would prevent the development of a fuel store and station in this location. Preventing the removal of the requested specimen trees would prevent almost any reasonable development of this site. Although the highest and best use of this site is a fuel station, and it would be an asset to the community and the citizens, development of any fuel station on the site would be unworkable under the current code requirements, therefore creating the unnecessary hardship. The hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. As we've explained, the size of the site is big enough for this development, but it's just barely big enough for this development. Furthermore, its location on a corner impacts the buildable area and the need for entries off of two roadways that are 90 degrees to one another. Furthermore, the specimen trees subject to the variance request here are located within the reasonable buildable envelope of the site, a condition that is unique to the site and beyond our control. The size, layout, and location of the site and proximity to neighboring residential use, coupled with the technical requirements of the code, are what create the hardship here. The hardship did not result from the actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The applicant is a contract purchaser and has taken no action with regard to the site to date. The hardship arises from the physical aspects of this particular site and the proximity of residential use adjacent to it. Finally, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice are achieved. For the reasons I've explained, this is a desirable use. This is a use that's consistent with the comp plan's identification of this area as desirable for higher intensity uses. It is a good location for a fuel store. It will provide an asset to the community in that it will provide a right-in, right-out alternative. Additional supply for fuel helps to balance the higher demand for fuel and contribute to a lower reasonable cost for fuel. And the requested variances would actually create a safer design, wider interior thoroughfares and aisles, less traffic flow disruption, a good line of sight between the employees of the store and the fuel pumps and the road beyond, and would allow us to respond to market demand in a manner that's consistent with the other uses on that existing corridor. For all of these reasons, we ask that you grant the variances requested. I ask for the opportunity to speak with you again should anyone choose to speak in opposition.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now open the evidentiary hearing. Is there anyone here to present additional evidence regarding this matter?
Good afternoon. My name is Shar McGinn. I'm the Director of Real Estate for GPM Southeast. We received a notice from our landlord, the property owner for 610 Eastwood Drive, or Eastwood Road, I apologize. I have a statement from our legal department in opposition from GPM Southeast, and I would like to present it to the board. Ms. Thurston, would I be able to present?
And just as a reminder to the board, because this is a statement from someone who is not here to be cross-examined or answer any questions from you all, you need to just weigh that evidence as you will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll need to provide a copy of that to the attorney so that he can address those issues. Do we have an extra copy? And we also need one for our board secretary.
I'm not sure whether to address this question to the chairman or to the attorney. Am I permitted to cross-examine the witness?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, after you've had an opportunity to read that, I'd like the opportunity to ask Ms. McGinn a few questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank, while the board is reading, do you mind?
Has everyone had an opportunity to read the handout? Scott, you okay? Could you come forward, please? Does anyone on the board have questions regarding the handout? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if you recall, the applicant's attorney wished to cross-examine
correct.
her, and he is seated over here to the side, so we could have a microphone for
Okay.
him and also one for her.
Okay. Mr. Frank, proceed, please.
Thank you. Ms. McGinn, I understand you may not have expected to answer a lawyer's questions today when you volunteered for this. I promise this won't take long. The letter that you've presented is from someone else who's not here and available to respond to questions. And so I'm not going to ask questions about the legal conclusions stated in this legal opinion letter, but I do have a couple fact questions for you. The emails that are attached to the letter identify an address for the store, your store, that I don't recognize. It refers to 3083 Eastwood Road. Could you tell us where your store is?
Our store is located at 610 Eastwood Road. 3083 is our store number.
Got it. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's across the street from the site that's in question today, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the nature of the business at your store? What do you sell?
We have a convenience store that we sell fuel and gasoline.
And what's your understanding of the applicant's intended use for the site across the street?
The same.
Ma'am, if you could speak into the mic, I'm sorry.
The same.
Thank you. The email chain between, that's attached to the letter between certain city staff members and a representative of your company describes a process. Do you understand what you were asking for, what you were asking the city for in that process?
I'm not 100% other than I know that we were trying to extend our fuel offering and were denied based on code.
And do you know if you applied for a variance before this board?
I do not.
That's all my questions. Thank you very much for your
Thank
patience
you.
with them.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that would like to present evidence? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion. Where do you want to start?
Hey, Melissa. So Sam just asked the person if they had come before the Board of Adjustment. And I'm looking at the emails, and it's, I don't know if he was given the right to, I don't know if the person that owns the Scotchman across the street was given the right guidance to be able to do this, because they were saying it was dimensional requirements. Is that what you were talking about earlier?
Yes, the dimensional requirements that I brought up at the beginning of the hearing, this is from where that stemmed. There is nothing right now that prevents the folks across the street from going through the proper process and either requesting a zoning determination letter or a variance to come before this board properly. If you'll recall, if you will remember, though, that this is a variance hearing based on this particular tract of land and what is unique to it. So the folks across the street can avail themselves of the exact same process that you all are watching Mr. Frank's client go through right now.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Also, Melissa, this is, if whatever would be granted or denied, anything would still have to be approved by city council when they'd go for rezoning, because what we're doing is the variance side, but if they don't get the rezoning, it's a moot point.
Correct, and if they don't go before you first to get the assurance that there will be a variance to these various zoning requirements, then city council wouldn't allow them to proceed with the rezoning.
So we could, if we granted certain variances, city council could still just deny the
Yes,
rezone?
the rezoning, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wait.
So I just wanted to, I mean, it doesn't seem like they've done anything in my mind to address my concerns of the specimen trees on the property. I think these are major variances to the updated land development code. There hasn't been any attempt to try and mitigate or adapt the design of the site or the design of the buildings and the fuel pumps to try and take that into consideration. To me, I just don't, I think these are hardships that are created by the applicant, by the type of use they're wanting to put there. I just don't see how we could grant some of these variances.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the findings of fact, I mean, number 3, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. They bought this land, they took the action knowing what they were getting into, and now they want to ask for a change. So if we follow the rules and we look at these 4, LDC was thought of and planned and written deliberately, and yeah.
I don't see a reasoning behind the changing of the location of the building based on really nothing. I mean, they're not saving the trees that might have been, some reasoning behind granting a variance because you had some, peculiarities with the site that required it because they were going to try and save these trees. I just don't see anything that I can grasp to try and give any kind of a variance for some of these, which are, significant variances of the LDC.
One of the reasons, I think, for moving the fuel pumps forward was to move them away from the residential properties on the back, which would be a positive, but does it meet the other 4 findings of fact?
All right.
I think, though, with the relocation of, say this site, like I said, right now, the site is not zoned for that, but if city council decides that, that would be a permitted use on that site. And then if you look, the fact about how to actually fill those pumps would be an issue that site would have that would be irregular to other sites. Talking about the 5 different things we're looking at, but the position, the building and those pumps, I think that is something that is unique to that site. So I put that out there for discussion. And I don't know if they probably have not purchased this yet, probably conditional on what they go through. But if the city did go through and approve this to a rezone, I think that is a situation that should be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, that's a particular use that they've decided that they want to put there. Maybe this property is not the best type of property for that particular use. I don't think every property can withstand, every type of use, and there are some peculiarities to this property and the way the zoning ordinance is written, the land development code is written, that it may preclude you from doing this type of a use. And that's just my feeling.
Any further discussion?
Should we just go through each one, and is that how we need to do this?
We can address, Melissa, each variance as it relates to the 4 findings of fact.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Item or variance request number 1 is to allow the accessory use fuel canopy to be located between the principal use and the right-of-way. Discussions on the 4 findings of fact. I think we've addressed item 3. The hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll skip to number 4. Like, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. It's not. LDC is pretty clear. And going back to number 1, like, what is the, I just don't see the hardship given the overall higher level thing here, that probably this lot might not be right for what they're looking to put there. So you can't tie hardship to that.
Okay, would anyone like to propose a motion on the variance request? One, to allow accessory use fuel canopy to be located between the principal use and the right-of-way.
I'll put out on the floor a motion to approve.
We have a motion to grant the variance request for the accessory use fuel canopy to located between the principal use and right-of-way. Melissa, question there. That's not the case unless we relocate the building to the rear of the property. If the building were located per the land development code on the front of the property, the fuel canopy is not between the building and the right-of-way. It's behind the building and the right-of-way, correct?
I'll take that. There are two code sections relevant to that particular item. One is 18198D3. City code requires that accessory uses, such as a fuel canopy, be located not be located between the principal use and the adjacent right-of-way, so not between the proposed building and Eastwood Road. Also, in the conditions for fuel canopies, section 18206A3 requires that fuel canopies not be located forward of the front plane of the building. So they could be beside the building, but they, to comply with code, should not be placed in front of the principal building.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, would you mind repeating your motion?
The motion would be to approve the request for the variance related to the item number 2, 605 Eastwood Road, 3 Cardinal Drive, and 7 Cardinal Drive. Propose that it would be granted, the variance is allowed, the use of the accessory canopy to be located between the principal use and the row. And the applicant has met the required statute findings.
Do we have a second on the motion? I'll second the motion so we can vote to approve or deny the requested variance. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of granting the variance request signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
It's 4-1 against. Item number 2,
Just
allow,
as a matter of clarification, could we show hands on that? I think I missed the vote.
all in favor?
That was just that was it.
Opposed?
So that was a 3-2, correct?
3-2.
Who was the
Who was the second one?
second?
Oh, well,
Did one of our alternates vote?
seeing reflections in the plastic there.
Catherine, if Patrick seconded, is it still 2-3 then?
I could second.
No, he can second and still vote against
Okay.
it.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to get it to a vote before the board. Variance request number 2, to allow fuel pumps and canopy to be located forward of the front plane of the building. Discussion.
On this one, I feel like this could set precedent for future, and I know this is a unique property, but if the city, with the land development code that they've issued, I do feel like this one would set precedent going forward for other possible situations like this. I do like the fact that I will say that Sam brought up the point of the crime through environmental design, and I do agree with that piece of it. But I think it could set precedent going forward.
And I can't see any reason to grant this variance, based on the peculiarities of this property. I mean, if they were attempting to, save some of these trees, and that's, the reasoning behind trying to relocate the canopy, I could see that as maybe some justification, because it's, peculiar to the property, and, there are some hardships there, but I haven't seen any attempt to do that, so I would not be in favor of that variance.
Any further discussion? We have a motion on variance 2.
I move to deny the variance request to allow fuel pumps and canopy to be located forward of the front plane of the building. The applicant has not met the required four statutory findings of fact.
Do we have a second?
I'd second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of denying the variance request signify, raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Variance request 3 is the removal of 5 specimen trees from the site.
I'd make a motion to deny that
I'll
variance.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hand, please. Item 4, variance 4, allow 5-foot variance from the required minimum buffer of 15 feet.
Chairman Moore, can you make sure that you're speaking into the microphone?
sorry.
The recording is not picking up you guys, so if y'all could speak into the mics a little bit better. Thanks.
Variance request 4, allow a 5-foot variance from the required minimum buffer of 15 feet.
I'd make a motion to deny that variance. I don't think, based on the other denials of variances, I think they'd have to bring a new site plan back to be able to consider that.
We have a motion to deny variance request 4. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, who was second?
Got
Scott, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed to.
Sounds okay. Variance request 5 to allow a variance of 105 square feet from the required 333 square feet for 1 parking island. Any discussion on that variance?
I would just make a motion to deny that variance.
I'll second.
All in favor? Raise your hand, please. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
4-1. And the final variance, allow a full variance from the requirement of foundation plantings at the front of the building facing Eastwood Road.
Again, I make a motion to deny that variance.
Second.
All in favor of the denial? Raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. The next item before the board is item 3, 1445 Eastwood Road.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This is a request for a variance at 1445 Eastwood Road. On June 23rd, 2020, City Council approved a conditional district rezoning of property containing 3.53 acres from Community Business Conditional District to Community Business Conditional District for 4,375 square feet of automotive service or a car wash. On May 5th, 2021, city staff issued zoning approval for a new car wash consistent with that approved conditional rezoning. Land Development Code Section 18390 allows for freestanding signs in the CB district on a 4-lane street to be located a minimum of 10 feet from the front property line and a maximum of 20 feet from the front property line. On August 16th, 2022, the applicant applied for a city-only sign permit showing the sign with a setback of at least 10 feet shown from the front property line, which complies with Section 18390 of the Land Development Code. On September 29th, 2022, zoning officer Tracy Lunsford conducted a city zoning inspection of that subject property and determined that the location of the sign did not comply with city code and it was in NCDOT right-of-way. The sign has since been removed from NCDOT right-of-way and placed on the subject property. However, the location is within a 10-foot non-municipal easement per recorded plat map on March 3rd, 2016. A 10-foot by 10-foot CFPUA easement was added to the property per a plat map recorded on February 28th, 2020. On November 17th, 2022, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to Land Development Code Section 18390 to allow the freestanding sign to be located 1 foot 10 inches from the front property line, which is a variance of 8 feet 2 inches. If the board chooses to grant the proposed variance, the applicant will need to obtain approval from the owner of the easement, which has not yet been identified. The applicant states that the property slopes drastically from Eastwood Road and an increased setback would make the sign difficult to read. The applicant further states that the wide right-of-way further inhibits visibility. This matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment today, January 19th, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, which I have placed on the screen for you. I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you.
You're welcome.
The applicant could come forward, please.
Yes, sir.
The floor is yours.
I'm sorry?
Did you have a presentation for the board? I'm sorry.
No, sir. This is the first time I've ever participated
Okay.
in a semi-judicial process like this, so I did not prepare anything.
No worries. No
okay.
worries. Any questions for the applicant?
Do you have any
Just need him to
comments?
state his name, please.
Yeah, could you state your name and address?
Stephen Umstead. My personal address, or
Yes.
943 Baldwin Park Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina.
Thank you.
You're the owner of the business?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you just kind of summarize what the reasoning is behind going for the variance? Just what?
Yeah,
what
yes,
the-
sir. Absolutely.
what the
I've got a
issues are.
couple photos. I don't want to break any procedural rules here, but I was hoping I might be able to pass those out, if that was okay.
You can present those as evidence.
Sir, do you have one of those copies for the clerk? I'm to your left. Do you have,
I can have another copy made.
okay. Did you just pass one around?
I did, yes.
Okay. We'll get it from the board. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Miranda did a very, very good job summing up what happened there. We initially, this is the 5th car wash I've built, New Hanover County, Onslow County. All car wash operators know that 80% of our business is spontaneous purchase, so a sign is very important. And this particular property has quite a bit of foliage and trees in the front, as there's a stream that comes through there, and there's 15-foot setbacks on either side. We can't really touch that vegetation. It grows fairly high in the summer, and the elevation decreases substantially from the street down to that stream. And if I were to move the sign back, I think it would render it fairly worthless.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? No. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'll open the evidentiary hearing. Is there anyone here to present additional evidence in this case? Seeing no one, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion. I went down there and viewed the property. I also had my truck washed while I was down there. It was spontaneous. And it is a unique piece of property, and it does slope fairly severely from where the sign is going back toward the car wash. And the sign has been moved a couple of times, or once, I think. So I think as far as item 2, the hardship resulting from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography, has definitely been met in this case because it is a severe slope. And it also, you know, as a tie into that, it did not result from actions taken by the applicant. I mean, it's, you know, the lot is what it is. It slopes fairly steeply from Eastwood Road back. The sign has been moved once, I believe. Is that right? Once? Yes, sir. And it's now in an unknown right-of-way. And the applicant would have to find the owner of the right-of-way in order to maintain where the sign is. So and the sign does line up with the other signs along Eastwood Road from the grocery store back. It is in line with those other signs along Eastwood Road.
Patrick, I would agree with you on those. Same reasons why. It is a unique property for sure. And the way the trees kind of block the view of the business, it would be very difficult to have a sign where it needs to, or I guess where the city says it needs to be.
And if we choose to grant this variance, the applicant would need to obtain approval from the owner of the non-municipal easement on the property. So I would like to propose a motion to grant the approved variance to allow a variance of 8 feet 2 inches from the required that a freestanding sign be located 10 feet from the front property line. The applicant has met the requirements for statutory findings of fact.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Variance request passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item before the board is item 43501 Oleander Drive, Unit 1.
This seems like a good opportunity to introduce a new staff member. This is Chris Hatcher. He worked for the city as a zoning enforcement officer for several years before recently coming back on board as an associate planner.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, member of the board. The property I bring before you today is 3501 Unit 1 Oleander Drive. The subject property is a part of the commercial strip development Hanover Center, constructed circa 1993, according to the New Hanover County tax records. The new tenant has proposed to move into the space on or about October 18th of 2022, last year. The applicant applied for a commercial sign permit 22-027380 for a new wall sign. On October 28th, 2022, Associate Planner Miranda Garman requested a resubmittal due to the sign exceeding the area allowing set forth in section 18-389A5A. Land Development Code section 18-389A5A A5A allows for a multi-unit building to erect either 2 wall signs per unit, no more than 1 per facade, up to 50 square feet total, or up to 200 square feet per building, whichever is greater. Since the total of all the signs in the multi-unit building already totals more than 200 square feet, the applicant is allowed a maximum of 50 square feet of wall signage, either in one sign or between 2 signs located on different facades. The applicant submitted a front elevation that you have before you of the sign and the area that the sign will cover if this variance is approved. On November 23rd, 2022, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to the wall sign requirement in the RB Commercial District pursuant of City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-389A5A. The applicant has requested a variance to Land Development Code Section 18-389, to install a 169 square foot wall sign, a variance of 119 square feet. The applicant states that the additional square footage of the sign will better enable patrons to locate the store and also aid emergency services to locate the store. This matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment today, January 19, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact. I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record, and I am available for any questions, and the applicant is as well.
Thank you. One quick, do you know how this size of this sign relates to the size of the sign that Steinmart had?
Can you say that?
Do you know how the size of the HomeSense sign relates to the sign that was there before?
So the sign that was at Steinmart, which was originally there, would have been under the old code. And since that sign was removed, they are now subject to the new code. The Steinmart sign, I don't know what the actual square footage of that sign was.
Okay.
I imagine it would have been greater, but again, since that's part of the old code and they are subject to the new code, we can't take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
I believe it just because I processed a text amendment just prior to the code rewrite, but I think that the Steinmart sign was right about 122 square feet. I will try to access the staff report that has that information.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant have a presentation?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. How are y'all doing?
Great, thanks.
Sorry, that was really loud.
That's okay.
I drove by the site.
If you could state your name and address, please.
Sorry, David Corbett, 2200 Disher Street, Charleston, South Carolina.
Thank you.
I drove by the site, and I'm sure everyone is familiar with where the Steinmart site was coming in. And with the 4-lane highway that is there at 45 miles an hour trying to get into it, even with GPS, got lost. Could not find where the site was supposed to be. There's a Chick-fil-A that's currently blocking any visibility to that sign, to that building when you turn in, and a Bank of America right there, which makes it unviewable from the roadway. And any patrons coming into that area would be hard-pressed to see a sign at 50 square feet where it is. The letters themselves, if you take that out of the backer panel, are technically only 57.23 square feet. So if you wanted to view it as just the letters themselves, we're only asking then for a 7 square foot variance with allowing for the backer panel to be there along with it.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Does that conclude your presentation? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
How many signs do you have on Eastwood and Independence?
For this shopping center, just the one, and then there'll be one under canopy for sidewalk traffic to see, roughly 4 square feet.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
You don't have any signage out on the Olander side?
I believe the multi-tenant sign is completely full right now, sir.
Okay.
You believe, or is it is?
It is. There's not even a Steinmart sign in it now.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to open up the evidentiary hearing if anyone has any additional evidence to present regarding this case. Seeing no one, we'll close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion. We've had this conversation regarding vesting of the sign ordinance, which is not currently available. And in my opinion, this has come before us on several occasions, and it may be a good idea to consider a text amendment to vest tenants, because I don't think a 50 square foot sign is really adequate for the size of the HomeSense store.
I would just say, if we go on the findings of fact, if I heard him correctly, he said his two hardships would be that people can't find that massive store, and then 2, emergency services can't find it. So number 2 is not relevant, that's not accurate. They'll be able to find it. And that's a standalone massive property at the end. So I don't see any hardship of being able to find HomeSense because of a bigger sign. Just trying to narrow down on number 1, finding hardship. I struggle to see hardship.
Yeah, well, I mean, that, you know, that's a shopping center that's set back anyway, so there's a lot of buildings in front of it, so trying to see anything from the thoroughfares is kind of difficult anyway. I don't think creating a bigger sign is the way to direct people
Yeah,
to your
we
store.
will open the floodgates if,
Especially for that shopping center.
Well, that's one reason I mentioned a text amendment, you know,
Yeah, I mean, the applicant, you know, brought up an idea which I think might be something that could pursue. You know, the letters themselves meet the requirements in the ordinance, but you could do something with the background, the wall. I don't know if that's something that really, I'm not sure if that really gets to the sign ordinance, if you were to paint the building itself and put the letters on the background. I don't know if that's some option, but.
you know, when Thermo Scientific came, they talked about the ratio of their logo, like the size of their logo, and I can see this is like a perfect square, right? Like equally dimensional, so I could see like, you know.
It is their new trademark, registered logo.
Yeah. So. 5 by 5, so you'd be looking at what's the max size is what, 50?
50 square feet.
50 square feet, yeah.
The ordinance allows for 50 square feet, and I believe in this instance for this building, it would only be on one facade. The side, I think 50 square feet is the total maximum, is that correct?
Yeah, so
So they can have one 50 square foot sign or two 25 square foot
you
signs.
say it to be like 7 by 7.
Right.
He'd have to have a 7 by 7 right now, and he wants a 13 by 13.
The backer panel itself is 13 by 13, the letters themselves.
Sir, I'm sorry, the evidentiary hearing is closed. Mr. Chairman, if you would like to hear more details, we'll need to open that back up so that he can come to the podium.
Can you pull up on the presentation, the view of the sign? The dimensions are posted.
It's like 13 by 13.
It's double what it would, 7 by 7 on that size building. It looks like a massive sign. And it'll open the floodgates. And I don't see any hardship based on number 1. There's no peculiarity, that's a hard one, to that property in number 2. Number 3, the owner knew what he was getting with that building. And we'd be breaking number 4. We're not following the spirit and purpose of all the work that went into those signs, the sign code.
Catherine, has there been any talk about a text amendment vesting portions of the sign ordinance?
We haven't had that discussion. We did recently, late last year, I believe in December, process some text amendments pertaining to signage. We did expand the amount of signage allowable in the regional business district, particularly for buildings like this that have 2 frontages. At that time, there was some concern expressed by City Council at allowing excess signage over what is necessary for different developments. We also talked about if the need arises to reconsider signage allocations in different areas, that we would do that incrementally, because it is a lot more difficult to scale back once you have allowed more signage than is necessary than it is to incrementally allow it as staff reevaluate situations and realizes that it's appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, reasonable to when you have two, this is a, considered technically a corner lot to, allow a signage on both frontages, but,
Well,
so it would
it
require-
is allowed, but it would be limited to 25 square feet per sign.
right. So you either cluster it in one sign or,
I thought it was up to 200.
No, it's based on the existing signage that's in the shopping center
already
now.
exists.
HomeSense is limited to a maximum total sign square footage of 50 square feet.
They maxed it out with the other businesses that are in there.
Because there's no vesting. The Stein Mart sign came down. So now the new sign is under the new LDC, and the limitation for front and side facade is a total of 50 square feet.
Patrick, if I may speak more specifically to that question of vesting, the code does amortize signage. It does not amortize very many uses, but that is one that is amortized. That's for freestanding signs, temporary signs, signs in certain districts like historic districts. Wall signs are not amortized. The idea is that as tenants change out, those signs will come into compliance with the code that is in effect at the time that they're changed.
Thank you.
So just to get this right, if he was able to put two signs, one on the side facing Independence and one on the front, each one would have to be 5 by 5.
Right, all right, 25 square feet.
So that
That's
would
right.
be pretty, that's
Pretty small.
that's pretty small.
Correct.
Given the spirit of this, and I mean, what are the thoughts on the size of the building and trying to meet the spirit and purpose and finding a fact number 4? What if it's a 7 by 7 to stay within the 50 square foot on the
I
front?
would be opening to
50
amending the variance.
So you're
to,
50 square
50
foot on the
square.
front, 50 square foot on the side, so we're staying within the spirit of finding a fact number 4, but not going with a monstrosity of sign that breaks the LDC. Did he say that he wants a sign on the side as well?
I don't know. No, saying no.
Not say one way or the other.
That has not been part of the request.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the request is to allow a variance of 89,
100 and something.
119.
yeah, 119 square feet on one of the sign on the front facade.
Is it any more, I don't want to jump ahead, but I could make a motion if the conversation's
Any
good.
more discussion among the board?
I'd make a motion to deny the variance for item number 4, 3501 Orlando Drive, Unit 1.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of the denial of the variance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. It's 4-1. Thank you. Before we move to item 5, which is 716, 719, 720, 724 South 4th Street, I'm going to recess for about 5 minutes.
Chairman, would you like me to go ahead and switch out at this recess?
Yes, I think that'd be fine. Board Member Monroe has to leave at 2:30, and it's 20 past, so go ahead, and we'll bring in an alternate. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thanks. please. The next item before us is 716, 719, 720, 724 South 4th Street, and 719 South 3rd Street.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. On November 28, 2022, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to tree preservation regarding one specimen tree in the urban mixed-use district pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Section 18316. On November 30th, 2022, planning staff accepted an updated application to include a variance to maximum building height in the UMX district pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Section 1843.
We're going to sub out Mark for an alternate, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, Councilman Saunier has recused himself on this case. Thank you.
The subject property is currently vacant with the exception of a single-family residence on 716 South 4th Street. Land Development Code Section 1843A allows for a maximum building height of 45 feet in the UMX district. The applicant has requested a 5-foot and 8-inch variance to Land Development Code Section 1843A to allow a maximum building height of 50 feet and 8 inches. The applicant states there is a grade change of over 10 feet for the consolidated lots, resulting in height restrictions on the 3rd Street side. The applicant further states that per TRC comments for future development, NCDOT will allow a turn lane off Wooster Street to drive aisles to accommodate emergency vehicles that require larger clearance and will restrict a 4th floor unit count if strictly followed. 720 South 4th Street contains a 36-inch live oak, which is considered a specimen tree pursuant to LDC Section 18316B. Land Development Code Section 18316B2 states removal of specimen trees shall only be authorized by a waiver from the Board of Adjustment. The applicant has requested to remove the 36-inch oak tree from the property. The applicant states that the specimen tree hampers continuous building and parking development due to canopy size. The applicant further states that given the size and shape of the canopy and proximity to overhead power lines, it appears that the specimen tree growth has been forced within the parcel from continuous over-trimming for electrical infrastructure maintenance. Removal of the trees will be mitigated according to the requirements of the code. Per Section 18316F, of the Land Development Code, removed protected trees shall be mitigated on-site using the same or comparable species. Mitigation for significant and specimen trees shall occur at a rate of 200%. For every 1 cal per inch of trees removed measured in diameter breast height, 2 cal per inches of mitigation trees shall be planted. Mitigation of the 36-inch live oak requires planting 72 cal per inches of comparable tree species on this site. This matter is set for hearing today, January 19th, and this case is subject to the 4 findings of fact that I have placed on the screen for you. I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Did the applicant have a presentation today?
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Beckley. I live at 1010 Nut Street, apartment 1212. I do not have a presentation. I do have a quick narrative of the 2 facts, and they're separate items, so if you have questions on either one, I can answer them. We did have a arborist come out to the site and evaluate the tree. Given the tree growth, it was likely harbored inside the site by Duke Energy trimming the lines. And we do know that we can trim up to 30% of the foliage, but the fact that it's stacked, we can only take arterial branches up to 30%. So there's not much trimming we can do, and also preserve the tree, is what we were told. This site overall is part of a conditional district rezoning. We're on the March 1st docket, I believe, for the 716 property that you see in this picture. There's a demolition request in currently, and we'll be separating the CFPUA sewer and gas lines later this week. Overall, this site is supposed to be an extension of the Jewel, the Mini Pearl, and the Pearl campus purchased by the same ownership. So it is a brownfield site, which prevents us from having any ground floor units, residential, because of the contaminants that were previously exposed because there was a former gas station. So with that in mind, we understand that per Land Development Code, Section 18-324 would allow building height to be exceeded for the current land code up to 75 feet, providing that we give at least a 20-foot setback to the rear and side. That being said, we know that we have a maximum 10-foot setback from the primary and secondary streets where the tree is located. So it prevents us from pushing the building back, which creates a hardship. And we know that that's got a 48-foot critical root ball. So it's going to be very difficult to create a building shape that works with the site and also is able to preserve the tree. And in terms of the height requirements, we did meet with the NCDOT. They were willing and able to let us come in off of Worcester Street, given that 4th Street is parking on both sides. We don't think we can get emergency vehicles down that street at all, and we did not want to encumber the residents with moving vehicles as well. So in order to do that, we have to create a 14-foot ceiling height for the first floor, get emergency vehicles, and also get moving vehicles underneath the building, and that prevents us from having a top floor unit count. So by going up higher, we can keep the same parking ratio, keep the same parking underneath the building, and also give the surrounding area a little bit of easement with parking. I'm available for any questions that you have, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. I'll open the evidentiary hearing. Is there anyone here to present additional evidence in this case? Please step forward. We'll close the evidentiary hearing.
Excuse me,
Sorry?
Chairman. As staff, I would like to say that this item is proposed for rezoning before City Council for the residentially zoned parcel. The project has not gone through TRC for site plan review, and so there is the possibility that accesses as currently proposed by the applicant would be modified in some way. I just wanted to put that on the record, that the site plan is not certain at this point.
Okay, but we need to rule on the variance prior to.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I went out to the site. I mean, all the limbs on that tree are on the property side. There really is no foliage extending out over the sidewalk or the road. It's all into the lot. And it is apparently, I'm not an arborist, but apparently from trimming done by utilities. If we look at the 4 findings of fact, unnecessary hardship will result from the strict application of the ordinance. This is on the height variance request. That's with 5 feet. You know, given this goes to number 2, given the topography of the lot, the way it slopes down, I think there is a hardship there based on the topography of the land, and we're within our purview on a height variance, and I'm really okay with a 5-foot variance to allow the 4th floor dwelling units. And of course, it didn't result from actions taken by the applicant. It's just the way the property is situated, and it is a continuation of the apartment usage that's there now. I think the spirit and intent there as well. Any thoughts on that or the specimen tree?
Yeah, I think the tree is, like, you generally try to err to the saving of it, but in this situation, I think that's not the case. I think it is appropriate to take a.
And if we do allow removal of the tree, it has to be mitigated by additional plantings.
Yes, sir.
So the removal of the tree would be mitigated. And again, it does affect the development of the lot. It is a rather peculiar tree because it, all the foliage is on one side. Do we have a motion to approve or deny the requested variances based on the four findings of fact?
I would move to grant the variance for the request for the 5 feet 8 inches to allow the maximum building height of 55 feet 8 inches, and that the applicant has met the statutory four findings of fact as we've discussed during. I'd also move to the other item that would allow the removal of the 36-inch oak tree from the subject property, along with the conditions of the replacement as outlined in staff report.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to approve both variances based on the four findings of fact. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Variance request passes. Thank you. Next item before us today is 1900 Wrightsville Green Avenue.
I believe this is the matter that Mr. Johnson needs to recuse himself. So we're going to need you. Yes, sir. Don't go too far.
Good afternoon again. Item number 7, 1900 Wrightsville Green Avenue. The subject property is a vacant parcel within the Wrightsville Green subdivision as recorded in the New Hanover County Register of Deeds in December 1987 prior to annexation into the city limits. The Wrightsville Green subdivision consists of approximately 60 parcels. All but 2 of them which were developed prior to annexation. The Wrightsville Green subdivision is zoned R15 residential, which requires the newly created lots to contain a minimum of 15,000 square feet. Lots within the Wrightsville Green subdivision range in area from approximately 3,240 square feet to 7,856 square feet in area, and all considering legal, non-conforming lots of record. Pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18-632, non-conforming lots of record may be developed in conformance with the setbacks requirements for the district in which they are located. LDC Section 18-28 requires that new principal structures in the R15 district meet the following minimum setbacks: front 20 feet, interior side 10 feet, and rear of 25 feet. According to the survey prepared by professional land surveyor Mark Glenn, the subject property contains approximately 3,517 square feet and is 35.88 feet deep at its shallowest dimension. Strict adherence to the current setbacks applicable to the subject property would severely limit the building envelope for the subject property. On December 1st, 2022, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to the LDC Section 18-28-1 for the construction of a single dwelling structure on the subject property to be built with a 0 lot line setback. The owner has not applied for a residential building permit at this time, as existing homes in the neighborhood do not comply with the minimum setbacks now applicable to the subdivision. In the application, the applicant states that any proposed building plan for the lot will be required to be approved by the Wrightsville Green Homeowners Association. This matter is set for hearing This matter is set before you for the Board of Adjustment January 19, 2023. Also, the 4 findings of fact And all the materials that were presented for you should be taken into record, and staff is here for any questions. And the applicant is also present as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant have a presentation?
Yes, sir. Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is J.C. Hurd. I represent the applicant, Wilmington Property LLC. As noted in the staff report, this lot is probably the last undeveloped lot in the Wrightsville Green subdivision. Wrightsville Green was approved under the New Hanover County zoning code in the mid-'80s. Our plat for our particular lot was recorded on December 23, 1987. Unfortunately, we were unable to find the approval file from New Hanover County Planning Department, which would give us some guidance on what was required or what was approved at the time. We only have what's on the ground now and the setbacks of the homes. But as stated, after annexation, this subdivision and this subject property are subject to the R15 classification by the City of Wilmington. As such, with the building setbacks, with this particular lot being a little over 3,500 square feet, it makes it basically unbuildable. Today, we are here to seek a variance to allow my client to build a home in conformity with the Wrightsville Green subdivision, particularly in regards to the setbacks. And if appropriate, I'd like to go through the 4 findings of fact, if I may.
Yes.
Number 1, unnecessary hardship will result from a strict application of the ordinance. That's true. Under the strict application of the R15 ordinance, this lot is basically unbuildable. As I understand it, the R15 has a 25-foot rear and a 20-foot frontage, and at one point in our lot, we're 35 feet wide, so we would not be able to build on a majority of our lot. So we would say we do have an unnecessary hardship. Number 2, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as its location, size, and topography. Well, as stated, yes, our size of our lot, a little over 3,500 square feet, its location, and the fact that it was approved prior to this annexation to be built on makes us, we do have a hardship in that instance. Number 3, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. That's true. My client has owned this property since 1999 as raw land. He deeded it to one of his other companies in the 2000s, but he's had continuous ownership now for over 20 years on this property, and he's done nothing to change the boundary lines of this property. Number 4, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety and security and substantial justice is achieved. I think we'd all agree here that when annexation did come, that the general thought was that everything that was previously approved would be allowed to be built out as approved. Unfortunately, we can't find that file, and the city is requesting that we ask for the variance in this case. As we're the last undeveloped lot in Wrightsville Green, we believe that the spirit, purpose, and intent will be secured as the applicant simply wants to build a house in conformity with the neighborhood. And again, a thorough search of the records in New Hanover County, City of Wilmington, we could not find the file which would tell us what this was approved under. Can we go back to the slide with the survey? Okay. If you look at that survey, if I may jump to this, you can see our surveyor has marked different areas, which I didn't highlight on that one, but if you look at the bottom, the lot right across the street, we're 20.4 from the street there, but then 7.4. And then you can see the house tapers back even closer to the street. You go across the street, we're at 6.8 from that house to the street, 6.9, 8.8, and then we're 1.3 from that one lot line. So one house directly adjacent from ours is 1.3 feet from the lot line. The house right beside us, 1.7 from the street and 2.1 from the rear. So you can see that when the surveyor did this survey, he called me, he said, "You're not going to believe what I'm finding out here." But all we simply want to do is build in conformity with the neighborhood. And remember that in our restrictive covenants, we're subject to an architectural review committee. So whatever we do here, they have to go back and approve. The proposal I asked for was 0 lot lines, and I realize that's a far reach. I do have a proposal to modify those to bring it more in line with performance residential, which we think will work. And if it's appropriate, I'll hand that out, copies to the group and the staff to let y'all look at, if that's appropriate.
It's okay, yes, thank you.
Under this plan, we had a person very knowledgeable in designing potential home sites for 3,500 square foot lot, taking into account what some ordinance would require. And what we came up with was 20 feet on the front, 10 feet on the front, and then 5 feet around the perimeter. And that will work. That will allow us our minimum square foot requirement of the HOA guidelines is 1,200 square feet. So it's a small lot, but we think we can make it work with 10, 5, 5, and 5. So that's what we would proffer to the board for approval. If you're not comfortable with giving us more, I would personally like to ask for 0 on the back or 2.5, but I realize that's probably not going to fly. But if you look at the neighborhood here, you can see we're all over the place with 1.7. One gentleman is 2.1 from the rear. So it's sort of we just want to be in keeping with the neighborhood. And whatever you decide here, you know that we have to go back for the HOA Architectural Review Committee, which they will then manipulate our plans, I'm sure. And what I'd like to do, I know there's probably some folks that want to speak. If I could reserve some time to rebut, if at all possible.
Yes, you can.
Any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll open the evidentiary hearing if anyone wishes to present additional evidence. When you step forward, please state your name and address.
Hello, Dalton Lyle, 5799 Marshview. The lot to the north there. So I don't have a presentation either, but all of my discussion is pretty much in the evidence presented by the applicant. So yes, and I think I speak for the group with me, and several of the majority of the homeowners, does this pass this board and get to the HOA? I don't think that many people will be on board or too happy, but that's nor here nor there. But regarding this lot in particular, it's almost like trying to fit a square in a triangle hole. It's to me, this lot wasn't built on for a reason. I think the gentleman mentioned that there was proof that it was approved, but yet that's nowhere to be found. I think that's kind of interesting. Also, the city just did a recent, it was completed last year, so 2021 in the summer, I think it commenced. They completed a rerouting of the stormwater from the Oleander, Park Avenue, Greenville Avenue, and Hinton Road, that square area. They redrained all that water to the Bradley Creek runoff, which is not really mentioned at all by the applicant, but behind the back line there is a creek. It's a really big creek, which is why the city dumped the water into there. I've only lived in my house for 2 years, November 2020. Since then, I've been through 2 hurricane seasons. Nothing's been too bad. The first year, 2021, I can't remember what the storm was actually, if it was like a 1 or a 2, but it was torrential rains. We also had water rising up through in that cul-de-sac. The storm, when it's high tide, the water will raise upwards through from the drainage in combination with the falling rain and the high tide creates a monstrosity of flooding. With that being said, to those 5-6 houses, there wasn't too much damage in 2021. Now, the one that we just had in 2022 was a tropical storm. I think that's the one that came up from Florida, and then it kind of went out and came back in. That one was not bad at all. I don't even think it was classified as a hurricane. With that being said, that was way worse than the year prior, and that's because of the rerouting of the water. So that in conjunction with this is just presenting a lot of problems that I visibly have seen. And that couldn't have been really foreseen 30 years ago. This neighborhood, I don't even think was deemed as a flood zone back then, which is why you'll see the houses all have basements and finished underneath. I understand the new structure would not, would be built on piling, so that's not really going to be a problem for them. But the problem and the spirit and the safety is not there, because when they have to go and build the foundation, there obviously has to be dirt pushed around. There has to be a lot cleared. That is going to push it, as you can see how close it is to the neighbor on the left there. He's not here today, but that would definitely encumber his lot in flooding. And then, like I said, with the last one, my house was inches to it coming into my house, and that wasn't even a bad storm, and that was without any construction going on here. So I think once they start doing that, that'll further complicate anything, and that's without question. Then you have to add in the fact of erosion, which was not mentioned either, and that is something that cannot be stopped. It can be stopped with lots of money. I don't think the city or anybody that's building is going to invest that type of money into building a blockade or a type of structure that will hold that erosion. Granting a 0 setback in the back would essentially put the back of the house almost into that creek. Virtually no backyard. It'll look out of place. You also, on that map right there, you can see there's a transformer and a city light right in the middle of their lot. I don't know who's going to pay to move that, and I don't know where that would go. Additionally, there's 4 cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood. I don't know if so I looked on the last meeting, it was from December, it was in that appendix. I didn't see it presented today, but if you look, there's easements in the back of at least 3 of the cul-de-sacs, Aaron Court. This lot is actually an easement. Now, if you look to the right of that transformer, if any of you have gone by that lot, there is a natural created ravine that the water actually runs down to get to the marsh. So destroying that, there's no telling where that water is going to go. And that's something that can't be fixed or helped. But like I was saying, the other cul-de-sacs all have an easement at the end, and it's a pretty wide easement on those other respectable cul-de-sacs with no houses on there. I don't think the other easements were ever deemed a lot, so they can't be built on. That lot, like I said, it's really pushing, trying to put a shape that doesn't belong there. Hence why nothing was ever built there. And I think trying to do it now is way too late after the fact. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else here wish to present evidence?
Mayor Roseanne Ditch, 5818.
Chairman Moore, if we may take a moment and swear this lady in.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. She's going to swear you in, Mrs. Speaker.
So, Mayor Rosandich, 5818 Marsh Street, I live at the other end and have for a number of years. There are some other neighborhood people. This is just a king.
Ma'am, no. We don't have a way to preserve that for the record.
Okay, so this is a picture of a king tide. When this neighborhood was built, the map that we found from '87 did not have it was common area for the back 2 lots. It was never supposed to be houses. I think over time they sold. Certain things probably changed. We had probably 5 or 6 developers, and it is what it is. And I think that's why some houses the setback isn't quite the same. We do have a big erosion problem, and we have a huge, even in a good rain, that lot, in fact, those 3 lots in the back, flood pretty severely. And I think it's almost unethical for whoever wants to build this house. I don't think they know what they're getting into. When the city added the new sewer system, I think they thought they were going to make it better. I don't know. I think it's made flooding worse. And there are probably 10 houses that flood, at least a foot on their first level. So the lot is pretty small. There is erosion. And I think if this neighborhood were to be developed today, we'd have 20% fewer houses because that water needs to go somewhere. And I think that, it's not just this neighborhood. I think it's like when you make decisions about putting these houses so close together, when we're in these floodplains, you got to rethink that because this water has no place to go. And our drainage system, I know the city tried, but I really think they made it worse. And we do have lots of pictures of, even in a good rain, that flooding. And some cul-de-sacs are a little worse than others, but that's a bad one. And our friends that live down there, it's always an issue. On their bottom floors, they have walls that they just kind of pull out, and because they're so tired of doing drywall. And so I think this should be a big consideration. And I think, as far as I know, this lot has not been sold, but I don't think the person that owns it has seen it during, a big flood. So that's what we have to say.
Thank you. Does anyone else here wish to present evidence? And I would ask that the evidence be new and not what we've heard. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Lynn Gibson, and I'm at 5814 Marshview Drive. I've been there since July of '99, so I have seen the erosion. I've actually, Dalton that came up and spoke earlier, his house was not there until a couple of years ago, and I have seen, since his house was built, really kind of on the easement that used to be there that we don't have anymore, because there was, I don't know, once you build on it, you just easier to obtain permission than or to obtain forgiveness than it is to obtain permission is how I think that the easement just disappeared with people building. But anyway, I have seen the erosion from his house being built and where it's gone. The flood zone has gone up the street further. So we don't have a bulkhead. We can't put a bulkhead in. It's the wetlands, it's marsh, and it just is I think it would be unjust to build a house on it. To people in the neighborhood, I was never in a flood zone at my end of the street, and 4 years ago, I think the rezoning was, so it's been a hardship on me to have to pay flood insurance now due to the additional flooding, I think, in our neighborhood. I was rezoned, so I was in the 100-year flood zone line. You can see it at the end of I'm at the opposite end, though. But I just think I'd like to, being there since 1999, seeing what's happened with just his house being built, and I don't know, how that even got passed. It was never a lot. That was kind of like common ground. So, I mean, this neighborhood was developed back in, I bought in 99. I think it was developed in late 80s or early 90s, 94 or something. So, but anyway, that's what I've seen living there, and I'd like for y'all to really think about it and see if we can not have another house built there. I don't think it would be fair to the homeowner.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hearn, would you like to rebut?
Yes, sir. Well, I would just simply ask the board to consider my 4 findings of fact. I think those are solid. I think also look at a basic question of fairness. We were vested and approved prior to annexation, and whether we could have been the first house built, and they might have had conversations about the 3rd or 4th house down the street. So I'd ask you to seriously consider that. She brought up a few safety issues, but nothing really that speaks to concrete. Certainly water flow and flooding is an issue. Whoever builds, my client builds or sells a build, they'll have to comply with all flood ordinances, all building codes at the time. But the fact of the matter is the lot was platted and it was approved. So I would rest my case there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And as a point of clarification, there's been some discussion about the common area shown in red for the map in front of you. The lot in question is the lighter blue lot below that red common area, and that was an original lot that, as recorded in the subdivision that's in front of you. This is the plat that was recorded with the New Hanover County Registry.
Correct. Thank you. Okay. I'll close the evidentiary hearing and we'll open it up for board discussion. I drove out there and looked around, and is an unnecessary hardship resulting from the strict application of the ordinance? In this case, I think yes, because it is a platted lot. It was originally a platted lot. Does the hardship result from conditions that are peculiar to the property? Well, now that it's been annexed, yes, but the smaller lots in there are 3,240 square feet. This lot is 3,517 square feet, so it's far from the smallest lot in the subdivision. The hardship didn't result from actions taken by anyone in this case. It was annexed by the city and everything changed. And looking at all the homes out there, I think construction of or authorizing or allowing construction of a dwelling there, which would be subject to the homeowners association at Riceville Green, is certainly consistent with the spirit and purpose. I do like the modified 10, 5, and 5 setbacks, which does give a little relief.
This is for, but I can ask Melissa or Catherine, wasn't there a case in the city where the use of the land was denied because of size a number of times that the city was overturned? That sort of...
Yes, there was a case at 115, I believe, Hillsdale Drive, and actually the applicant for that case is sitting here today, so she can correct me if I get any of this wrong. But that item went before the Board of Adjustment on, I believe, 3 occasions, and each time was denied a variance, even though the applicant had demonstrated that they could not build, not even a meaningful size structure, but any structure that would meet building code at all without obtaining a variance from the Board of Adjustment. But that variance was not granted. The applicant appealed to Superior Court, and in consultation with our attorney's office, they reached a settlement in that case to allow a structure to be built that complies with building code and also still observes some reasonable setbacks. I believe it was 5 feet on each side in that case too, but it may have been 7.
Thank you. I think the proposal of 10, 5, 5, and 5 setbacks is certainly reasonable. And I think this property does meet the 4 findings of fact.
And anybody that does any development will have to go to the higher standards that are in place.
And it would have to also receive approval from the HOA.
Okay, all right.
It would need to beat the flood regulations too, as far as the finished floor height, so flooding shouldn't be an issue there. But yeah, unfortunately, this is a platted lot, and I don't think this board could restrict somebody from building on it as long as the setbacks are reasonable.
I would like to propose a motion to grant the variance with the secondary plot that was presented with the 10, 5, 5, and 5 setbacks based on the 4 findings of fact.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Variance passes. Thank you. The next item before, swapping out. The next item before us today is 615 North Front Street.
Good afternoon. The subject property is located in the Central Business District and is subject to setback and parking standards pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Sections 1843, 1844, and 18340. Land Development Code Section 1843 requires all new construction to be placed no more than 5 feet from front and side street property lines. Section 1844C4 states any street shown as a primary frontage street in Figure 1844.15, CBD primary and secondary frontage streets shall be designated as a primary frontage street. Land Development Code Section 1844C4 states non-primary frontage streets shall be designated as secondary frontage streets to which secondary street standards are applied. One secondary frontage street may be exempt from meeting the maximum side street setback. In this instance, Nutt Street and North Front Street are primary frontage streets, and Hanover Street would be considered a secondary street. The applicant has requested a 1-foot variance to Land Development Code Section 1843C to allow the building to be located 6 feet from the side street property line, which would be Nutt Street. The applicant has requested a 3-foot variance to Land Development Code Section 1843C to allow the building to be located 8 feet from the front property line, which would be North Front Street. The applicant states that the existing topography of the site restricts the project from meeting ADA and floodplain regulations without a ramp or step access and retaining walls adjacent to the existing sidewalks. Land Development Code Section 1844C4A2 prohibits ground floor parking, structured or surface, within 20 feet of the primary street frontage. The applicant has revised their plans to comply with Land Development Code Section 1844C4A2 such that their first level parking is predominantly subgrade rather than ground floor. Land Development Code Section 18340A3B states parking facilities shall not occupy the corner of a block for a distance of 35 feet away from the corner, nor within 20 feet of a right-of-way. This requirement may be waived by the Technical Review Committee when a site is already developed with a building that will be adaptively reused. The applicant has requested a variance to Land Development Code Section 18340A3B to place parking within 20 feet of a right-of-way and 35 feet from a corner. The applicant states that no portion of the parking area will be visible from the street, as it will be entirely enclosed with the exception of vents in the entry-exit located on Hanover Street. The applicant further states that compliance with this section of the LDC would result in loss of 1 level of parking. This matter is set for hearing for the Board of Adjustment today, January 19th, 2023. The case is subject to the 4 findings of fact which are on the screen. I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant and their agent are here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Board. My name is Amy Schaefer, and thank you for pulling up our presentation. I'm with Lee Case. I'm here this afternoon with Allison Engelbretson and Dan Fisk from Paramount Engineering. I am not going to talk to you about the details of our variance requests. I'm going to let Allison and Dan do that, as they are very technical. But a lot of the hardship request has to do with the particular topography and location of our site. So I did want to walk you through some of those pictures right now. And as you can see, this is across from the convention center. So this is our aerial of where we are located. It's the old WWAY site. It's currently vacant. And as you can see, Wilmington is relatively flat, but not our parcel. And so we have, it's over a 25-foot gradient difference between Front Street and Water Street here. And so again, I think this is a really good picture Allison found on Google of the drop-off. So you can see the topography shift. And again, just some of the location of our property. And now as we get into the technical requests, I'm going to ask Allison and Dan to walk you through those specific requests, and we're also available for any questions.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Ingebretson. I am a landscape architect and land planner with Paramount Engineering. We are here representing our client this afternoon for this project. Let me tell you a little bit about the project so you understand our design constraints as we talk through the rest of the variance requests. This is proposed as a mixed-use project. It'll have commercial on the ground floor and will have residential above. We propose structured parking, which is subterranean, all except for the corner at Front and Hanover. And I'll explain that in more detail in just a moment. It will be 195 residential units, no more than 195 residential units, and just under 20,000 square feet of commercial and amenity space. So our site, as has been described, is sandwiched between Front Street and Nutt Street, and falls from Front to Nutt towards the river. I think we all are familiar with that area of downtown and the steep grade there coming up from the river up to Front Street. So it does create a special challenge for us as we design this. And let me walk you through each of the variances and why we're requesting them. It has been mentioned that we are requesting the variance from the 5-foot maximum building setback. We do have an interesting situation on Nutt Street, which will probably be better shown on the next slide, but let me tell you what we're looking at here. The areas that are highlighted in yellow are the areas that will be required to set back away from the right-of-way. The red line around the site is, on all of the roadsides, is our right-of-way. And we are asking for allowance to be 8 feet from the Front Street sidewalk, right-of-way, and 5 feet to 6 feet from the Nutt Street sidewalk. So what you normally have in situations of a mixed-use building is at-grade entrances, something like this. Our client has developed flats on front. This is one of the entrances that goes to that building. But what we have is a situation where we've got a walled site right now that will need to be manipulated. Our site is on the left-hand side of this slide. We are directly across from the convention center, which is on the right-hand side, and you can see how they've dealt with one of our other site hardships, which is the base flood elevation in this area. So what happens in this location, the sidewalk that you are looking at right now is at about elevation 7 to 8. We have a base flood elevation that is located along that blue line you see along Nutt Street. It is at base flood elevation 9. So by virtue of what we're dealing with in flood regulations, we need to build a ground floor at about elevation 11, yet we have other fire life safety requirements that require us to get people out to that sidewalk. So we have very little space to do that in, and that's one of the reasons that we're here talking about this variance today. So we envision that we will end up with something similar to what the convention center has done here, a raised platform that's ramped and stepped and creates a nice and dynamic streetscape, but is set further back than the maximum 5 feet. We have a slightly similar situation there on Front Street in that we need to set back because the grade changes as it goes from Front to Hanover Street. So we have a cross grade as well as a grade from Front to Nut. I will talk more about that in variance number 2, which is primarily focused on the 20-foot minimum parking setback. Now in this, our understanding in talking to staff and working through the TRC process, we believe the intent of the LDC requiring a minimum parking setback is so that in the CBD, the central business district, such as this is located, you're not looking at the grills of cars right next to a sidewalk. You know, you have a nice designed streetscape and the building is integrated into that streetscape. In our instance, we believe that we're meeting the intent of the code, and let me explain why. This is a section of along Front Street. You will see here there is a portion of the site we are allowed to meet at grade, such as the first slide I showed you, the flats on Front, where you'd walk right in from a streetscape. We'd be able to access this normally and would be able to technically comply with the LDC. But as we progress towards Hanover, we'll have a challenge with that. Let me explain this particular section. This is on the right-hand side, the section of the building where you see there are 2 levels of parking below grade. You would technically walk in from Front Street at the 3rd level on North Front Street. Now, if you were to take this section all the way across on Nut Street, you would have an exposed 2 stories. You know, you would be at ground level there. So then to talk about the 20-foot variance, or the variance from the 20 feet. To help you understand what we are assessing here, we've got the red lines that indicate the right-of-way. We've got a purple overlay that shows you approximately where 20 feet would fall in the current building. And then, of course, the sections that we've talked about. The elevation on the left-hand side begins to show that 6 feet elevation change as we hit that cross-slope low point at Hanover. Now, in this instance, what we're looking at is a ground floor that is technically above grade, but is not necessarily accessed at this point. We would ramp to the point where these, or step or something to get people into these spaces, or have a centralized, entrance further down when we're at grade. But because we are not far enough in design at this point to know exactly how the building needs to be designed, we want to come before you and present what we think is the best design solution, which is to have something like this that would allow us to have a ramp should we need it. Say we get into a situation where building code review is coming in and telling us that we need to put an additional exit here, we would want to have the ability to do so if we were required to. So this is the crux of our 20-foot setback situation. And the area that we were just looking at in those elevations and the sections is pretty much taken from this point on North Front. We are looking to the north in this shot. And then this is existing site condition there at that corner at Hanover. Sometimes it's difficult for people to understand from drawings what we're talking about. So there is a built condition. Again, this is another of our clients' projects. But there is a built condition that is standard in downtown where you see a building sort of coming out of at grade and going to a dropped condition. It does not necessarily have to be an eyesore. It definitely will have landscape and all of the LDC's other requirements of architectural glazing, building material changes, and those sorts of things. This is another example of what something could look like if we're talking about an elevation change where ground level suddenly becomes about head height. Now, variance 3 is very similar to variance 2. I won't go through all the same details I just did, but we are required to have a 35-foot parking setback from the corner of Hanover and North Front Street. And again, the same thing, we're asking for a variance here so that we can put structured parking that you will not see from Front Street closer to the street. This green overlay shows you the same thing we looked at previously, where that 35 feet is going to fall in the building. So it is a Board of Adjustment case, so I want to walk through some details, some technical details about these hardships and variance requests. So the first thing that we are asked to provide to you is, what is the hardship? Can we not meet a strict LDC requirement? What is the hardship on the site if we cannot do that? And we've discussed that Nutt Street is the low point on the site. When we talk about design, that's our control. We have to start there. We have to start at that base flood elevation that I was talking to you about. So we know that our ground floor on Nutt Street automatically has to be raised up. We know that we have a lot of fall across the site, and to make reasonable use of the property and to be in compliance with the special character district that is put over top of this particular site, anything north of Red Cross is in what the city deems as a special character district. To be in compliance with that, it encourages mixed use, and if you do a building that has residential, the residential cannot be on the ground floor. Therefore, we have some extra commercial requirements that we need to do to make sure that everybody can access those spaces. So all of those things combine into a situation where it puts us in a creative design mode where we have to try to meet the intent of the ordinance, but may not necessarily be able to always do it. That is why we're here this afternoon. We have some ADA concerns. There are slopes that you have to meet when you are talking about getting people in and out of buildings. You can't exceed 5% without handrails, and I can go through some more details if you're interested. But in any case, it makes it very difficult for us to pack all of this in and get people in and out of the building without asking for these variances. Now, to the parking piece of this, the site itself offers a very interesting design problem for us. Also an opportunity. To make highest and best use of the site, we have two options. We want to provide residential, and the code tells us that if we want to provide residential, we have to provide off-street parking. That, in this case, means we need to provide it interior to the site. We would either have to wrap commercial all the way around a structured parking deck and set it at grade, but you know, a 25-foot drop is a pretty significant grade and makes that challenging to do. The way that you do that is either you would step your building or you would cut into the hill, which is exactly what we propose. And just as a reminder of that, let me go back to this section. So we are cutting into the hill, so we have those two levels of structured parking below grade or substantially below grade. So we believe what we are doing is protecting the intent of the code, where we are promoting public health, safety, and welfare, and trying to consider all the codes that we're required, not only the LDC required to design for. And the next point that we need to talk about is a hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the site. I think I've covered those. I just described the different building techniques that need to occur to make use of this site. And I should point out here that it's not just the use that we're bringing before you. Anything that would need to be built on, or would propose to be built on this site, would need to go through some level of variance, either this or another type of variance, to make reasonable use of that site due to the topography and the base flood elevation. So point number 3, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. Again, this is an existing condition, and I won't go through too much more on that, but I am happy to answer detailed questions. And then the 4th point, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance. We feel like what we're doing with this design is bringing together all of the requirements of the ordinance and trying to come up with a creative solution. We'll have this integrated dynamic streetscape that may not be exactly to the letter of the code if these variances are granted, but I think it's very much in keeping excuse me, very much in keeping with the things that you see in downtown. You know, you often see a raised platform and stairs leading down, or an entry court going out to a sidewalk, and then the landscape that you walk through to get to that point, and then the street trees and everything that's beyond that. So we believe that the design of this building will be very much in keeping with everything that you'll see downtown already, and things that will be built to code in the future. We will not have any visible parking from anywhere except, you know, right there at the entrance, the one entrance and exit there on Hanover Street. And the variances that we're asking from do not apply to Hanover. It's a secondary street, so we don't need a variance for an entrance and exit there. I do want to point out that we've worked with staff on a couple different designs of this, and we did have originally some driveways that came in from Nutt Street and Front Street, trying to figure out how to make use of that grade. And it turns out that we would have been before you asking for another variance today if we had gone through with that proposal. Those driveways along Nutt and Front would not be allowed in the locations that we had them, because there either wasn't a driveway already there, or we couldn't move a driveway that existed. So our solution was to come in from Hanover, create everything as the better, more usable subterranean parking deck, and do this integrated streetscape. So I do want to bring Amy back up if she can offer anything else, and we're all available for questions should you have them.
I think Allison covered everything specific to the project. Unless you all have questions, I just want to ask for the record that our application, presentation, and all evidence be entered formally into the record. And I think this photograph that Allison took is kind of the best picture that kind of shows some of our site constraints and concerns that we have, but nothing further.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here? I'm opening the evidentiary hearing. Is anyone here to present additional evidence in this matter? Thank you. We'll close the evidentiary hearing. Regarding the first variance request from 5 feet to 6 feet, In order for the project as it's proposed to be ADA accessible, it really has to be done to allow that extra foot for stairs and ramps for accessibility. So I think the unnecessary hardship there is not being able to comply with ADA requirements for accessibility, and that is unique to the topography of the property. And of course, did not result from anything the owner did or did not. And I do think, it's certainly within the spirit of the ordinance based on what's across the street of the convention center. So as far as variance request 1, I really have no problem with that at all.
I would agree with that, and I think the applicant did a really nice job laying out the 4 findings of fact for us as well. That piece.
Does the staff have any comments on, this not meeting the, setback requirements? Do they have any thoughts about the Central Business District guidelines and this not meeting quite the requirements?
Will concur that it creates an issue for accessibility, and at times there are competing interests within the code, and certainly accessibility would take priority over a setback in staff's opinion.
Thank you. And the other 2 variances deal with the parking issue. Discussion regarding the variance request 2 and 3 of an additional 3-foot setback, and then parking within 20 feet of the right-of-way, within 35 feet of the corner.
Yeah. I think all of these variants are kind of tied in with the topography issue on this site, so I don't have any issues with them.
I would tend to agree. I think, I would tend to agree. I think it's a project that really fits in with the character of downtown. And there won't be visible parking from the street except for the corner of Front and Hanover. From what I understand, that's not really an issue because there's no variance request needed for that corner.
If we're good on discussion?
Yep.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Based on what has been presented in the 4 findings of fact, I would propose that we grant the variance request for 1 foot from the requirement that all new construction in the CBD be placed no more than 5 feet from the side street property line, and that the applicant has met the statutory findings of fact. And that would relate to, then moving to number 2, that would be to grant the variance to request 3 feet from the requirement of that all new construction in the CBD be placed no more than 5 feet from the front property line, and the applicant has met those requirements, statutory findings. And then on to number 3, that I would move to grant that variance, that the request to place the parking within 20 feet of the row and within 30 feet of the corner, that the applicant has met the statutory requirements and finding of fact as outlined in their presentation.
We have a motion to approve the 3 variances requested based on the 4 findings of fact. Do we have a second?
I'd second that motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Variance request passes. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The next item before us today is item number 9, which is 206 Moss Tree Drive. You've been busy today.
A little bit. So for our final variance request, we have 206 Moss Tree Drive. The subject property is a vacant parcel, Lot 51, located in the Regency Court Phase 2, a performance residential subdivision located within the parent subdivision of Landfall and recorded in the New Hanover County Registry at Map Book 51, page 373, in August of 2007. The site contains approximately 7,570 square feet and is subject to a 20-foot wide perimeter buffer along the rear southwest property line, which was a requirement for the Performance Residential subdivision at that time. The site, subsequent to the recordation of the subdivision, City Code changed such that Performance Residential is no longer a development option for new subdivisions. City Code Section 18-436, cluster development sets forth similar standards for alternative site layouts for the purpose of minimizing infrastructure needs, protecting environmental areas, and maximizing open space. Current city code requires a perimeter buffer of 25 feet for lots located on the periphery of the cluster subdivision. On or about July 20th, 2022, the applicant applied for a building permit to construct a new single-family dwelling on the subject property within 10 feet of the rear property line. On or about July 22nd, 2022, Joan Mancuso reviewed the proposed dwelling and determined that the proposal encroached into the recorded buffer. On December 1st, 2022, planning staff accepted an application for a variance of 10 feet to the required rear yard setback in the R15 district and 15 feet to the required perimeter buffer for a cluster subdivision to construct a single dwelling with a 10-foot rear yard setback. The applicant states the lot is too small and has a triangular shape. Staff notes that the lot area is consistent with the lot with other lots within the Regency Court Phase 2 subdivision, which has lots ranging from 6,737 square feet to 18,495 square feet. In addition to the required perimeter buffer, the site is encumbered by half of a 20-foot easement on the northern property line and half of a 30-foot utility easement on the southern property line. The applicant further states that the decreasing rear building setback of 20 feet to 10 feet will grant the owner the ability to build a home that meets the current HOA guidelines and the Landfall Architectural Review Committee guidelines. Should the board grant the requested variance, the applicant would be required to record a revised plat to show that the perimeter buffer easement has been reduced or eliminated. This matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment today, January 19th, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings in fact. I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record. And I am available for any questions, and the applicant is also present.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The applicant have a presentation?
Good afternoon. My name is John Henry. I am the owner of 206 Moss Tree, and at this time I'll turn over to Cindy Wolf, who will be representing us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm working with John and his partner on this particular site. Regency Court, and specifically Lot 51, is a parcel in Pembroke Jones Park, which is a portion of the gated community landfall. And staff research, as Chris pointed out, stated that Regency Court was developed under the performance standard carried over from the county ordinance back during the annexation. And this has obviously, as we know, caused different issues over the years, but we think we've got a reasonable solution for this. The subject of the variance is the rear setback, and so application of that full 20-foot, we do believe, would create an unnecessary hardship of the construction of a home that's consistent to the size and character of the neighborhood we're in. And I can come back to this particular slide later, but I think it's also important to see that what is behind this lot is not another neighborhood, is not any residential property at all. It is zoned office and institutional. It is the back campus of Castle Branch. There are sewer lines, there's a sewer easement, there is a power line easement, so I think the location of this site is a big factor in what we're requesting. I also think it's important to understand that the red line that you see and what I have in red in the oval was the exterior boundary of Pembroke Jones Park. The point of Performance Residential at the time, the letter of it was there needed to be a minimum 20-foot perimeter setback from the exterior of all projects. In this particular case, I don't know whether it was because it was a sewer easement or what, but they added, when they platted Regency Court, a 20-foot perimeter building setback along the back property line. It is only along the back property line of lots, I don't have a mouse, but where the blue boundary is, the lot above it, but as you go up the power line easement, it's only a 10-foot setback. So it's sort of interesting, who knows why, but it is an unusual situation. Yes, Lot 51, size-wise, is consistent with several of the with different lots that are in the Regency Court, but you can see as far as the building envelope, the buildable area that I have in blue compared to the gray cross-hatching on all these other lots, it is substantially less as far as the building envelope available for the building footprint. Lots on cul-de-sacs taper from the rear to the front and are often the situation here. This lot in particular also has those public utility easements, both for sewer and drainage on either side of it. When my client bought his lot, he came to the city, apparently got not straightforward information, but neither here nor there, that was a long time ago. What he was told to do was the plat shows a 20-foot perimeter setback. You're bound by that. So he went to the Architectural Review Committee of Regency Court, and you can see that in 2020, they agreed to the 10-foot setback in the preparation of his plot plan. Since then, the plot plan that is on your screen was approved in October of 2022, and so he was all ready to go forward with his construction. It was then when he came to the city, Joan determined that this perimeter setback was on the plat and needed to be applied in absence of a variance. So this is the footprint, how it is affected by the 20-foot perimeter setback. You can see it is only a small portion of the building itself and the covered porch. What's interesting is covered but open porches and those types of things are actually permitted to encroach into side and front setbacks, but for whatever reason, not rear setbacks by right. This is the amount of encroachment and what it is actually, the small amount that the 10-foot setback would remedy. And again, that Pembroke Jones back park exterior boundary, there is still, from the 10-foot setback, would it be approved to be applied, still 23.9 feet and 33.8 feet of perimeter setback from the exterior boundary of Pembroke Jones Park. I have just slides of the floor plans and the elevations if you wanted to talk about them at all, but just generally speaking, the unnecessary hardship is the restriction to the building envelope, which is adversely affected such that a new home would not be consistent with the size and character of the neighborhood. We do believe that the location and size make a difference. The lot location on a cul-de-sac inherently diminishes the feasible footprint, and the size and shape of the lot, along with the easements, make it peculiar in comparison to the other lots. Hardship result on the actions of the property owner? No. He went to the architectural review. He got permission to what he thought was the appropriate venue to vary from the setback shown on the plat. And so now we were here asking for the variance from the city to coordinate with what the landfall has already approved. The variance we do believe is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent. This latitude of reducing that required setback does not adversely affect any other residences. It does not affect the separation from the exterior of the Pembroke Jones Park community with the residential homes. There is still the 20-foot perimeter offset from that. And everything behind this house, as I said, is the sewer easement, a power line easement, and commercially zoned property. So it won't adversely affect public safety or any other value of property. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. I'll open the evidentiary hearing, even though I don't see anybody else sitting out there. Anyone like to present additional evidence for this case? I'll close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion.
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation where obviously they're constricted by, a buffer that's really set up to protect the residential from the commercial. This is the resident actually asking to encroach into the buffer. So if the buffer encroachment doesn't affect them, I think this is a reasonable variance to grant. I think obviously the shape of the lot makes it difficult to be able to put a home on it once you start adding in all the easements.
Yeah, plus, the setback from the Pembroke Jones Park exterior boundary, excluding the initial setback, is greater than the requirement. So I agree, and it is the more conservative residential use that's asking for the encroachment.
Right. Yeah. So I think they've met the four findings of fact for the variance, and I'd make a motion to approve it.
We have a motion to approve the requested 10-foot.
Yeah, allowance of the variance of 10 feet to the rear yard setback requirement and 15 feet to the perimeter buffer in an R15 cluster development, allowing the structure to be built with a 10-foot rear yard setback.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Variance request passes. Thank you. And there actually is one other item before us today, which is our proposed 2023 meeting calendar. I've looked at it and it appears to be on the third Thursday at 1 o'clock. So I'm okay with it.
Hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. Do we need to vote on okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the 2023 calendar as presented?
I make a motion.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. My wife was here earlier today, and my son, it's her birthday. So for the record, I was going to say happy birthday, but she left, so I'll say happy birthday anyway.
Thanks. I just wanted to bring up one item. Unfortunately, I have a potential work thing that's going to be taking me out of the area, and it looks like this may be my last meeting. I won't know for sure, but I just wanted to, say how much I've enjoyed serving on the board.
Now, are you resigning or just taking a leave of absence?
I don't know if you can do that, but I'll know for sure, and I'll submit something. But just want to say how much I appreciate everyone that serves on this board, and obviously the staff, the work that they put in to get us prepared for these meetings. So in case I'm not here next month, you'll know why. But anyway, I appreciate everything.
Thank you. If there's no further business before this board, I declare the January 19th meeting adjourned.